So anyway, we're hoping to have open houses. We'd like to have broker tours. I mean, I think it could be handled where you say we can't have more than a certain number of people in the property at a time, but we'll see. We'll see what the governor's office has to say. Like I say, C.A.R. is lobbying diligently. They're even talking about they may have to take some kind of legal action or something to help our members. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Association of Realtors. This is our shortest of our 3 sessions. And we're going to talk about, here's our mission statement. That we exist to provide the tools, resources, and advocacy for our member success. So hopefully that what you've seen so far is realizing that we are providing the information you need along with the state and national association to be able to do your jobs, that we're working on your behalf to make things happen. We have a very unique situation that we're in right now, and that with the COVID-19 and the office being closed and things, we do not anticipate our office being open for full functionality of having in the auditorium training sessions, committee meetings, all the stuff that normally goes on here probably is not going to happen for quite some time. I happen to be in the office today, but we are usually working from our homes. I just needed better bandwidth to be able to put this presentation on for you, so I came in. But we are not actually open as of this time, and we don't know when we will be, because although real estate is an essential service, the Association of Realtors is not an essential service. So we're under the same guidelines as any other office situation. And the recommendation is, if we can work virtually and we're doing that well, that we should continue to do so for quite some time. So just so you know, we did upgrades within the last 12 months that we changed our phone system to a voice over IP system that allows us to take our phones calls anywhere we happen to be. We have, so all of our office lines work. You can call the extensions for anybody and it'll go directly to their cell phones wherever they happen to be. We have our computer systems are all now cloud-based. We had a server in the office a year ago. We now have it all cloud-based. It just happened that all the steps that we took lined us up perfectly for being able to work remotely, having no idea this was coming. So we're very fortunate that we're in a position that we are. So a couple things I want to mention. One is the term realtor. You'll probably hear some people say realtor, but if you look, there's no extra syllable between the L and the T. It's not realtor, it's realtor. So as a realtor, we would hope that you would all call yourself a realtor and not a realtor. So that's just one little tidbit of things about being a member. And the second is, see that big R, or actually the smaller R in that circle, that means it's a registered trademark, realtor. So only someone who is a member of the National Association of Realtors can legally use that name. So somebody that has a license, but they're not a member, cannot call themselves a realtor. They can only call themselves a real estate salesperson, real estate broker, whatever, but a realtor designates membership in the National Association of Realtors. Now, there's certain things that happen when you have a registered trademark, and that is we have to use the term correctly or we could lose that trademark. So if we would ever put adjectives in front of realtor, like saying, I'd like to say I'm a green realtor because I have a green designation from the National Association of Realtors, but I can't put the word green in front of realtor. I can say I am a green designee and a realtor, but I can't say I'm a green realtor. So you can't say I'm your hometown realtor, or I'm the Goleta realtor, or whatever. So just be careful on how you use that term because it's a registered trademark. By the way, I do teach the green designation class also, if anybody would like information more about that part of real estate. I've become kind of a state and national expert in that. And I've taught for the National Association of Realtors in Washington, D.C., in Chicago, in Colorado, as well as teaching throughout California. So that's one of my fortes. All right, so we have a really nice website, and Stephanie, who you've all met one way or another because you signed up with her to be a member here, is in charge of our website and has just done an outstanding job. So all of our updates that you're getting from Jeff, our communications guy, who's putting out, Stephanie posts all those up there. We've got calendars of events. We've got all different kinds of things. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. Look around. You'll find information about the Code of Ethics, and you can pull up a copy of the code. You can look for all different kinds of things there that you would like. Government affairs information, ethics, events, education, MLS information. I know for me, if I need to look up something in the MLS rules, the fastest way for me to get there is just pop open our website and go to the MLS tab. That, I could instead be looking, I know they exist in our files here, but it's faster just to go to the website to check it out. So check out what we have at SBAOR.org. That is your website as a Realtor member here. The SBAOR.com is the public-facing site that has the property search. And I'm gonna somehow go zip, zip, zip faster than I should. All right, so here's our team that's working for you. Casey is our education and events manager. Lisa is at the front desk, takes care of all the central lock issues. She's the first one to contact. If you want to pay your bill on the phone, she's the one that's going to take that call for you. Jeff does our communications. He's the one that's in charge of getting our newsletters out and all those updates about the COVID issues. Stephanie, again, does all the membership. She takes care of the website. She also deals with professional standards. So if anybody files a complaint that we'll be talking about when we get to the Code of Ethics section, she's the one that processes all of that. Ani on the bottom left is our MLS director, taking care of all the MLS issues. Krista Pleiser is our government affairs director, well known throughout the state and country as someone who can get the job done with government to make things happen. Mary Cantello, I need to change her title there. She's now, we call her our Chief Operating Officer. She does all of the billing and paperwork and all the behind the scenes things to keep this place running. And then as the executive officer, I'm the one in charge of the staff. But because I have such great staff, I do orientations, things like that. And then I just take a nap at my desk most of the time because everybody does such a great job. I don't have much to do. All right. So let's talk about some of the committees that we have here. So we have an awards committee that their job is to find people that have done an outstanding job, whether it be working within transactions and looking for the agent of the year, or maybe a community service award because somebody goes above and beyond with what they've done for community service. Maybe there's somebody in affiliated type businesses that does something that's really good, that's real estate related, and we can give them an award. There's all kinds of different things that happen, including the Howard Gates Award, which goes out to a Realtor member who has completed probably the most difficult transaction of anybody that year. And without the diligent effort of that agent, that transaction would never have closed. And so that is a very prestigious award that goes out every year. These awards are given at the same time of the installation of our board of directors, which is the first Friday in December. And it's held at the Coral Casino. And we are sure hoping that this year we will have a live installation and awards luncheon. But we'll see. You know, everything right now is in flux, and we'll see how it goes. We have a budget and finance committee. They're the ones that look at our financial statements and investment policies and figure out what to do with the monies. They're the ones that analyze and set the budget every year so we can figure out what we have to set the dues for our membership. Now, we have not had a dues increase on the association or the MLS for at least 10 years. I've been here 6.5-ish, something like that, and I know there have been no increases since the entire time I've been here, because we've done a good job, the Budget and Finance Committee has, of making sure that we operate within our budget and that we get things done appropriately without having to raise the monies, without having to raise the fees for you. Some of the things you need to know about this place is that we own this building. Somebody had the foresight back in the 1950s to say, we're going to buy this building rather than rent as the Association of Realtors. So we own it free and clear. We have a very low tax base because of the fact we've owned it so long, things of that sort. We also have solar power on here. So we just on our last electric bill have gone negative for the year. That Edison's going to owe us money instead of us owing them any money. We have drought tolerant landscaping that we do not water throughout the year. It can make it all the way through because it's all native planting. So if you look at it, I think you'll find it looks very nice. But we've cut way down on our utility bills, things of that sort. We actually lease some space to an attorney firm upstairs. So we actually have a net zero expense building, that the amount of money that we generate from the rent covers the expenses we have of operating this building. So we have a situation that you don't have to worry about rising rents and things like that coming out of your dues. So we're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish here on your behalf, and keeping the dues down to the level that we've kept them at. We also have an education committee. So they're the ones that decide what are the appropriate classes to put on. So they've been diligently working recently to find out what's happening with our situations, how is it affecting our business, and how can we educate all of you on the issues that you need to be aware of. So what's happening with the C.A.R. legal staff and things, and let's have them involved. What's happening with insurance for wildfire issues, and let's have insurance experts come in and talk about that. So they're always looking at what the topic is that's appropriate under the situation and getting that out to you. So we have a tips and tastes the last Tuesday every month. And right now it's being done virtually, but when it's live, you can actually come into a live class, hear from the experts, and get a lunch. So hopefully we'll be back to those days within at some point. Just everything's up in the air. We have an events committee where they have these talking head things. I don't know what that's all about, but the events committee schedules all the fun things that happen. We typically have a fiesta party every year that is the kickoff to fiesta. We have it the Monday before. The fiesta runs Wednesday through Saturday. We have a Monday event as the kickoff, and we'll have El Presidente here. We'll have the Spirit of Fiesta dancers. We'll have a mariachi band. We close our parking lot and set it up there. Great food, drink, all for a very limited price for you to get in. It's just a wonderful party that we get to throw. Unfortunately, this year's had to be canceled. So watch for that one in future years. But we also have a member appreciation party, a committee appreciation party. We have a golf tournament that is usually held in May and had to be postponed. We're looking at probably having it in September. And we raise money for charity, and we usually raise around $50,000 for charity from the golf tournament. So there's a lot of fun stuff that happens within the events committee. So watch for those events as they open back up in the future. We also have a government relations committee that's dealing with what's the government trying to do now type of thing. So we have our local GRC committee that looks at what's happening from the city of Santa Barbara, the county of Santa Barbara, city of Goleta, city of Carpinteria. What are the regulations they're putting in, and then we weigh in on them to see how it affects you, our members, and make sure that we help them craft the legislation to be as least onerous as possible. Sometimes we can't win everything, but we work diligently on your behalf. That same committee then also meets as the local candidate recommendation committee, the LCRC, where they look at all the candidates who are running for office and interview them to see who we think would be the best candidate for us. And it doesn't matter to us whether they're a Democrat or Republican. What matters is how do they stack up as part of the realtor party. So what are their positions on property rights and issues that are important to us, and we'll then make recommendations out. So every year at election time, watch for our recommendations on who you should vote for locally. Then the state association also gives us recommendations for state candidates, the National Association for national candidates, based on the realtor party position. And again, doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. What matters is what do they believe in that's going to affect our lives in this business. So part of that is we have a Realtor Action Fund committee that helps raise money for helping on political issues. Just so you know, we had a time last year that we had to go to the city and make some significant change. They had a zoning information report that was an onerous thing that was happening, that when you sold your house in the city of Santa Barbara, you are required to pay $495 to have an inspector come to your house and look for zoning violations. Clearly a violation of our constitutional right against unreasonable searches, because they had no probable cause, no reason to believe there's any problem, but yet they had a law that said you have to allow them into your house to look for violations to see if they could find something. We tried to take court action on that, and unfortunately had a judge say we were beyond the time that we should have filed and threw the case out, which we think was a mistake because it should have been a constitutional issue. We then took it to the voters and we filed an initiative and got all the signatures necessary, and we were going to have it on the ballot. And because we had it so well prepared, the city then backed down and said, well, we're just going to eliminate this ourselves. So now on the books, it still says you have to do a zoning information report. But what that means is a seller must give to the buyer, so you'll facilitate this on their behalf, a link to the street file so the buyer can see everything the city has about what's permitted, what isn't permitted, et cetera. So information's good. We want to have the information. We want to make sure a buyer is fully aware of what they're getting. And we want to make sure a seller fully discloses if there's anything that's not done legally. But we don't want to have an inspector come into a house and look for a problem, because especially what was happening was they would find something and say, oh, no permit was found for the deck out back, let's say. And the person selling the house says, well, the deck was there when I bought it. And they go, yeah, the previous inspector missed that, but now we're catching it. So now you have to bring this up to code and get permits and deal with the issue, even though you didn't have anything to do with it in the first place. It's like, that can't be right. But they didn't grandfather anything in. It was terrible. We had people losing $25,000, $50,000 on a sale of a house because of some issue that the city had said was okay on a first zoning information report, but then was saying wasn't okay later. So it was very important that we take care of that on behalf of the citizens of Santa Barbara and our members. So we did that. Well, we spent probably $250,000 doing that. And where did that money come from? It came from RAF, the Realtor Action Fund. So it's something that's a voluntary amount of money that you put in, but that money goes to causes like that to allow us to be able to fight these battles when we need to on the local, state, and national level. So the good news for us is 250, we don't raise that much money here, but the state helped us out. The national helped us out, because when you make an investment, it gets split between the three. So we highly recommend that everyone contribute to the Realtor Action Fund. When you get your billing in January, you're going to see that there's a line item on there at $148 that goes to the Realtor Action Fund. We highly recommend you pay it. But here's the deal. If you haven't made a sale by then and you're sitting there saying, I don't know if I can stay in this business, and you don't have an extra $148, It's voluntary. You don't have to pay it, and we understand. But once you're making money in this business, it's like, it's cheap for $148 for what you're going to get back in advocacy on your behalf on the political side. So we have a committee that helps raise money. You'll be hearing from them at times, trying to give you a little extra push to make an investment. And by the way, if you can't pay 148, pay 25, pay 100. Do what you can. There is no obligation that it has to be 148. I wouldn't go below 25 bucks, I don't think, but participate. Say it matters to me, I can't pay the 148 right now, I'll do that. Now, many of us pay much more than 148. There's various levels. There's crystal R's and golden R's and different things. Some of our members are paying as much as $5,000 a year because they feel it's that important. So just be aware of that. And the other thing is, the other way you can help out is to answer calls for action. And if you text the word realtor to 30644, so either write that down now or just pull out your cell phone and do it right now. Text the word realtor to 30644. It will set you up to be notified on what we call red alerts. That if there's an issue where it's like, please contact your senator or your congress member about this issue, they'll send you something that's all pre-prepared, and all you have to say is yes, and it'll go out in your name saying, I support the fact that we want to protect private property rights. I support the fact that we want to keep the mortgage interest deduction on the income tax if they're trying to eliminate it, things like that. So it's probably more important that you be involved than it is that you give money. So by texting realtor to 30644, you can sign up for that today. Okay, you know we have a multiple listing service committee because we just did the MLS orientation, so more there. Professional standards, I'll talk more about the professional standards committee and the grievance committee as we deal with our code of ethics class. We also have a statistical review committee that their job is to put on an economic forecast every year. So we have an annual presentation. It's usually mid-February. It's usually at Best Parker's. It's a Hilton now, I believe. It was the Red Lion. It's changed names a number of times. But anyway, down by the beach there, we will have a statistical review economic forecast. I highly recommend you go. It's about $50 to attend, but you'll come out of there knowing here's exactly what the increase in our sales were or our decrease in the sales for this year versus the last. Here's what happened to prices, whatever. So when you meet with your clients, you can say, here's what's going on in the marketplace. And they're going to go, oh, well, here, this is a knowledgeable realtor. They really know what's going on. Well, how do you know that? Because you spent 50 bucks and went to the economic forecast and got all that high level information. So there'll be information on our commercial market, what businesses are coming to town, things of that sort. We have always someone from the California Association of Realtors that comes in and gives us the global, national, and state perspective on what's going on, as well as in statistics, exactly what's happening on the housing market here in Santa Barbara. So highly recommend it, mid-February every year. Then we have the board of directors. The board is the ultimate body that makes the decisions for this association. So there's 14 total members, 13 realtors and 1 affiliate member, and it's up to them to make the decisions and set the policies for the association. As a matter of fact, the board of directors is my boss. So it's your peers that serve there that make the determination of setting the policy. So we make it very clear. They set the policy, then it's up to us as staff to carry out the policy and make it all work. But they're the ones that make those decisions. So if you know anybody in your offices that serves on the board of directors, feel free to give them suggestions. We're always looking for better ways to make things happen. One of the things that's happening right now within our crisis is I'm telling folks, let's not lose an opportunity that this crisis is giving us. How can we do things better? How can we do it differently? Maybe we should Zoom our orientations always. I don't know. We'll see how it works. We'll get feedback from you. Do you like it this way? Do you think it's better in person? Should we have a hybrid where we do it in person and we Zoom it to those people that would prefer it that way? We're open to suggestions. It's like we want to say we need to do things differently. Right now, you have the benefit of being new, and you can say, okay, I'm going to work toward the new normal, because things aren't going to be the same in the future as they are right now. And we have so many of our members saying, well, I just have to sit here and do nothing because I'm waiting until they open up open houses again. And my position is, if the government's tying one of your hands behind your back, use that other hand creatively to find new and better ways to get the job done. Let's start doing virtual open houses. Let's start doing virtual broker tours. Let's make sure that you're meeting the needs of your clients. And let's learn from this experience rather than saying, let's sit around and wait for the normal to come back, because we don't have an old normal coming back. It's going to be a new normal going forward, and we need to be prepared, ready for it, learn from this, and get there the best we can. And I encourage all of you, if you have any suggestions, we just sent out a survey to all of our members saying, what have you learned through this crisis that can help us do a better job as the Association of Realtors? If you have any thoughts, let us know, because we want to have the best association in the state. I think we're probably pretty close to that, but we may not be there, but we want to get there. We want to strive for it. Once we're the best in the state, then we'll be the best in the nation. But let's keep working toward that. All right, so part of your benefits when you join, hopefully you're all aware that when you join, you're not just joining the local association, but your dues are, a portion comes here, a portion goes to the California Association, and a portion goes to the National Association. So when I said we haven't raised our dues, I can't say the same thing about C.A.R. and N.A.R. So the dues of our members have gone up. It just hasn't been local dues that have gone up. But you get great things from them. You get zip forms. You get a legal hotline from the state association. The National Association right now is providing all of you with telemedicine. If you have any kind of ailment that's not COVID related, or if even if it was, you can call a number and you can get medical assistance over the phone and advice. That's all included as a member benefit. If you want to rent a car, you can go to hertz.com/NAR, budget.com/NAR, avis.com/NAR, and you'll get a 40% discount just because you're a member of the National Association of Realtors. If you want to buy a new car, if it's a Chrysler product, Chrysler, Fiat, Jeep, you'll get an immediate $1,000 discount just because you're a Realtor member. So there's things like that. There's newsletters that are written on your behalf on a monthly basis from the California Association. There's information on legislative information. There's information on market data, what's happening in the marketplace. There's so much information, it makes it hard to find. But I highly encourage, go dig around at C.A.R.org and N.A.R.realtor. And you should find lots of information that from both of those sites. So it's part of your membership. You are members of N.A.R. and C.A.R. And I highly recommend to you that you take full advantage and start by checking out their websites. Okay, so that concludes our association portion of our orientation. So what we have now coming up is the Code of Ethics training. And since we just recently took a break, I think we can just jump into that right now. First off, does anybody have any questions? I'm just trying to look on the chat because I'm seeing it for the first time. Any questions anybody has, feel free to unmute yourself and just fire away if there's any questions about the MLS or the association that hasn't been answered for you. Seeing none, I'm just going to keep yapping. Are you guys tired of listening to me yap yet? Okay, well, I'll just keep yapping, and we'll talk about the Code of Ethics. Probably one of the most exciting presentations you'll have in your career. But I do make it interactive. Now, one of the things that I've done within the Code of Ethics training is when I do it live, I put signs in each corner of the room, A, B, C, and D, and then I ask multiple choice questions throughout the course, and you have to all get out of your chairs and walk to those corners. I don't have that ability today, but I've created a poll where you're going to be able to go to the corners, not to go to the corners, but you can pick the A, B, C, or D, and we'll see how well you do. What's fun is having it do in live, though, because you all get embarrassed by saying, oops, I'm standing in the wrong corner right now. But you won't have the embarrassment factor going on here. But I still ask the questions, and I'll put a poll up for you to be able to answer those. All right, so let me get back into my slides here. Any code of ethics. Excuse me for just a second while I'm bringing this up. I forgot that it had crashed on me earlier. And I will go back and get to screen share. All right, slideshow from the beginning. All right. Hopefully you're all seeing that. And we'll get going talking about our code of ethics, which is your promise of professionalism. By being a member of the National Association of Realtors, you are automatically agreeing to abide by the code of ethics. So we don't give you a choice in that. You can just say, okay, I'm a member, I'll obey. So in this course, which is going to go between now and about 1 o'clock, is we're going to identify key aspirational concepts that are in the preamble of the code. We're going to describe general business ethics. We're going to describe all 17 articles and what would be possible violations of them. Describe the process for enforcing the code, including your duty to arbitrate. Identify the due process elements, identify factors that are considered by the hearing panels in procuring cause and in ethics cases. So here's our first question for you. What year was the Code of Ethics established? Is it A, 1908, B, 1913, C, 1929, or D, 1968? So all of you get in your mind which answer you want, A, B, C, or D, because I'm going to have to make this go away to run the poll, and all it's going to say is A, B, C, or D. So if you think it's 1908, you're going to say B. A, B is 1913, C, 1929, and D, 1968. So I'm going to stop the share here real quick, go down to my poll, and okay, are you seeing a poll pop up? Did that happen for you? Okay. So just need you to pick your A, B, C, or D. So I can see the votes come in. Can you see how people are voting? Not yet, okay. All right. So I've got 5. I know we had some people leave after the MLS portion. How many should we have, Steph? 5, 6. I'm going to say everybody's in. That's good. So I've got 4. What's that?
We should have 6.
We should have 6. Anybody that didn't vote? Okay, see, here's how we find out who's sleeping here. Well, I'm going to end this polling on this one, but we got to find out who didn't vote. All right, so we've got 4 Ds, 1 C. So let me take that poll off. Go back to my screen share. It would be nice if we just went right back to it. All right. So the answer was not given by anyone in the class. The answer is B, 1913. So let's talk about that. Okay, so what was happening in the early 1900s or even before 1900 was we had no licensing of real estate practitioners. There was speculation, exploitation, and disorder, and caveat emptor, which means buyer beware, govern transactions. So it would happen that somebody would come out and say, I want to buy this parcel of land. And somebody might say, well, I'll sell that to you, no problem. But how would you ever know they owned it? Because there was no such thing as a title insurance company or a county recorder's office or things of that sort early on. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to give you a deed, but did you actually own it? So there was a lot of things like that going on. So what happened is in 1908, in a group of brokers in Chicago, formed an organization that they called the National Association of Real Estate Exchanges, which became N.A.R, the National Association of Realtors. So that began in 1908. By the way, does anyone know what year the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors began? And the answer is 1908. Same time and totally independently, a group in Santa Barbara started a local association of realtors as the same time that the group in Chicago, which was local just in Chicago when they first started it, began what became the National Association. So we are as old as N.A.R. So in 1913, they said, okay, we're saying we're different, that we're the ones that if you can trust us, that when you buy through us, the person really did have ownership and you're not going to be scammed and things. So we're the real practitioners. Even though there's no license requirement, this group said we want to stand out as being professionals. So what they need then is a code of conduct that establishes that. So they came up with one of the first codes for business after medicine, engineering, and law. It was one of the first to say, we're going to focus on service to the public and our commitment to professionalism. And it included at that time duties to clients and duties to other brokers, as is the case today. So the Code of Ethics was then the basis for later adopted license laws. So anybody want to unmute and tell me what year California required licensing? Hearing no one, I will tell you, it was 1919. So one thing I often joke about in a live class is that was in real estate principles. It was often a state test question. And does anybody here have a license to sell real estate in California? Because that might have been on your test. And it's like, well, yeah, everybody has a license, right? But no one knows what year we started it. So it was 1919. All right, so since its inception, the Code of Ethics has required arbitration of contractual disputes among and between realtors. To me, that kind of seems like a relatively new concept. But back in 1913, the code required that there's disputes between realtors, it needs to be arbitrated rather than sued in court. It also had in there respect for other brokers' exclusive relationships with their clients. And it had the requirement of cooperation between and among realtors. So all of that was in place back in 1913. Okay. So there is a difference on business ethics. When you take a class in ethics on your license renewal, it is usually business ethics. It talks about industry codes, company policy, moral values, things of that sort. But it isn't about the Code of Ethics, because the Code of Ethics only applies to realtors. So somebody could have a license and need to renew it, but they're not a realtor, so they don't need to learn about our Code of Ethics. So the business ethics class is a slightly different that you would do. Now, C.A.R. has a licensing course that includes within it Code of Ethics training to meet your Code of Ethics training for your triennial cycle, as well as meet your business ethics requirement for the state. So my recommendation is if you're going to renew your license to use the state's class, because it will meet both your code of ethics requirement and your business ethics requirement in one fell swoop, as well as the other parts of the 45-hour continuing education course. The best part of it is it's free. It's a member benefit to all C.A.R. members to take their license renewal course. So I highly recommend it. It's all online, easily done. So whenever you need to renew your license, which for most of you will be almost 4 years from now, I would recommend you do it that way. So one of the things about that too is I mentioned meets your code of ethics requirement. C.A.R. has an auto upload system into the national database, so you don't even have to do anything. Once you've completed that course, your ethics will be updated. Or if you took the course through any other source, you would have to bring in a certificate to prove you've taken it so we can upload it. You will all be, by the way, taken care of because you're in our class. So Stephanie will automatically update your national record that shows you've completed ethics. So realtors share one common characteristic, and that is regardless of their specialty, whether it be appraisal or property management or commercial, all realtors are bound by the code of ethics. So there's a preamble in that, and Stephanie will be sending that out to you. So read through that preamble. The preamble is aspirational, and it starts off under all is the land. And one of the main concepts in the preamble is the golden rule, that treat others the way you want to be treated. So you might say, well, somebody violated the preamble because they didn't do something the way I would have liked it done. Well, you can't violate the preamble. You can only violate Articles 1 through 17. So just so you know, there is no disciplinary action taken because the preamble is aspirational, not enforceable. So within the code itself, there are 3 sections. There's duties to clients and customers, duties to the public, and duties to other realtors. And then within those sections, they comprise the 17 articles. And each article is the broad statement of ethical principles. Like Article 12 says, you need to be truthful in your advertising. Okay, but what exactly does that mean? Well, within that then, we have what are called standards of practice. I'll talk about that in a second, but they will define and give more definition to that broad statement that's in there. But only the articles of the code can be violated. So there's 17 different articles. Somebody's in violation of one of those articles. They can't say they violated 12-2 in the standard of practice. It's just they violated Article 12 regarding false advertising. So then these standards of practice that are under each one of the articles, they support, interpret, and amplify that article. So it might be under Article 1, which is your fiduciary duty to your clients. There's going to be a lot of additional information in there about what that really means, to say if it doesn't fall within one of these standards of practice, then maybe it isn't a violation of Article 1, but you don't actually cite which standard of practice it is when you make a complaint. There's also official case interpretations. So if you want to go on to the N.A.R. website, you can find information where they go, here's an example where somebody did this act. Would it have been a violation of Article 2 for failure to disclose, or would it be a violation of Article 9 because they didn't get their contracts in writing? And they're really kind of close call cases, but then you'll read through and it'll give you then, yes, it was a violation because of this, or no, it wasn't a violation because of this finding. So if you're ever interested, you can go onto the N.A.R. site and find those. The time that I would recommend that you read through those is some night when you're having trouble sleeping. It might be something worth reading that will quickly put you to sleep. So how does this code evolve? Well, we have the code as it stands, but then every year, the National Association of Realtors has a board of directors meeting twice a year, mid-year meetings that are in Washington, D.C., done virtually this year, and a national meeting, which this year will be in New Orleans if it happens in November. It will happen either virtually or in New Orleans. During those years, the committee meets. There's a professional standard committee. They review all the sections. They have people make recommendations from throughout the country, and then they make amendments to the rules as appropriate. So they have an interpretations and procedures subcommittee that first comes up with the recommendation, then it goes to the full professional standards committee, and then on to the board of directors for adoption. So one of the things is the code and the law are not necessarily the same. The code has to be construed within the law, but it actually imposes duties above and in addition to the law, and it restates certain fundamental legal principles. So one of the things that I want to point out is that there are things that are different in law than in our code. As an example, hearsay is inadmissible in a court of law. Hearsay is not inadmissible in a professional standards hearing. So someone can say, well, I was told that such and such happened. And that's an admissible comment where you couldn't have said that in a court of law, because we have private rules with our private enforcement. And that was something that hearsay was ruled inadmissible by the Supreme Court at some point in time, but does not carry all the way down to our hearings. Now, our hearing panel will give less weight to hearsay evidence, but it's not precluded from being entered as evidence. Pathways professionalism, you'll get that document. We mentioned it during the MLS section also. Talks about respect for public, respect for property, respect for peers. Please read through it once you get it, just as some nice guidelines on how to be a good ethical professional. By the way, speaking of professional, over the years, we've always referred to the real estate industry. And I'm trying to change my language, and I recommend we all do. Instead of calling it an industry, let's call it a profession. I'm a member of the real estate profession, not the real estate industry. And I think that way we can all hold ourselves to have a more professional attitude if we think of it properly as a profession, not just an industry. Okay, let's talk about the enforcement. Every association is responsible for enforcing the code. It includes providing mediation and conducting ethics and arbitration hearings. So by providing mediation, we don't have to personally provide the mediation. We have to make sure that that service is available to our members should they want to use that. And it says here only realtors and realtor associates are subject to code. You might not have heard that term before, realtor associate. When I first joined, brokers were realtors and salespeople were realtor associates. But at some point, maybe 20 years ago, it was changed to where we became an all realtor association of realtors, that we no longer have realtor associates, but it is still used in some parts of the country. So enforcement of code in associations where someone holds membership has jurisdiction. So if you violate something, no matter where you are, if you have a violation, we could have jurisdiction. But it also can have jurisdiction where MLS access is. So we saw that we had some people here that were realtors somewhere else, but they were members of our MLS also. Well, if that's the case, if they violate the MLS, if they violate something in the code of ethics, we could have standing to hold the case here if it happened here, even though they're not a realtor member of our association. So it's either where it took place for somebody that has MLS access or your home association, if you are in fact a realtor here. And there are times that we will actually farm things out back and forth between associations. But we have a case right now that we're looking at handling on behalf of the Ventura Association because they have a potential conflict of interest with almost everyone on their professional standards committee, so they would like us to hear the case for them. And we've had things have to go out the other direction also. So the associations do not determine violations of law and regulation, only whether they violated the code of ethics. However, our panels can send things to the district attorney's office or the real estate commissioner if they feel that something was so onerous that they need to know about it. So for dispute resolution, we have a formal and informal process. Our formal process, number 2 there, is ethics complaints and arbitration requests. The informal is an ombudsman program for ethics cases and mediation for issues that are financial. So an ombudsman program, it's only available if offered by local associations, and we do in fact have it. It's a voluntary process. Our ombudsmen are senior members of our association. They're people who've been around a long time. They probably have an average of well over 20 years of experience. Many of them are broker owners that manage offices and get to see all kinds of activities happen in their careers. And then they are ones that will try to find out somebody's got a complaint, they're not happy about something, the other side's just not willing to talk to them. We try to get that ombudsman involved to talk to both sides, find out each side's story, and then help them come to some resolution without having to file a formal complaint. Many complaints, though, it makes sense that it actually get filed. One of the things that we find here is that we don't have enough complaints filed for the amount of activity that's out there. We have very few cases that come through based on for our size of our association. Part of that is because we have really good agents here who aren't violating the code of ethics much. The second is we have a really good group of brokers here that have an informal network of one broker calling another and saying, hey, tell your guy to knock that off. And they just handle it. But there are times that people commit violations and somebody might say, yeah, I'd like to file a complaint against them, but I'm worried that I might end up in escrow with them and I don't want to file it because then that could affect my client's ability to get the house. Yeah, that might be the case, but then file it once things are done, because some of these people are going to continually to offend. And I've heard an excuse one time, somebody said, you know, I'm really mad that the guy didn't present my offer. And they say, well, why don't you file a complaint? He says, yeah, but I might take an offer into him again sometime. Well, if they didn't present your offer now, is it going to get worse if you file a complaint? But it sure isn't ever going to get better if you don't. So I think you need to, those kinds of things, they need to be filed. By the way, I just use the term guy, and I've done it a couple times. I don't mean disrespect to women when I say that. I'm using that as a generic term, member instead. And I apologize if anybody takes offense at that. I'm going to work on doing better. So the ombudsman's function, its primary role is communication and conciliation. They don't make judgments. They don't determine if there was an ethics violation, but they anticipate and identify and help resolve misunderstandings before the disputes rise to an unethical behavior and that type of thing. So they can repair communications between the parties. Okay, so that was ombudsman. Mediation. If there's a commission dispute or something like that, we encourage mediation to work out those problems where the parties get to sit and work it out between themselves. And it is the preferred method of conflict resolution by the National Association of Realtors. So in mediation, disputing parties meet with a mediator. The parties create a mutually agreeable resolution, and they resolve it through the organization, and it must be available to all realtors. And as I said, we don't actually have mediators that are trained as professional mediators because we have very little need for them to have that, but we have outside mediators that we would use should that need arise. On any arbitration case, we always recommend mediation. And I can tell you, many of the companies that are involved in arbitrations don't mediate because they feel they've already tried to work it out between themselves and didn't get to the point, and they'd rather just go straight to arbitration. But we make sure it's always offered. So if a resolution is reached, the parties sign an agreement containing the terms, and if they've done that, even though they filed an arbitration already, they can just stop it and say no hearing needs to be held. So why is mediation better than arbitration? Well, it's less expensive, it's faster, has a maximum range of solutions because it's up to the parties to come up with that. They control the outcome. The disadvantage, though, is it has uncertain closure. You could go and have a mediation that went all day long and they ended up still with no solution. According to N.A.R.'s information they give us, they say it can maintain and improve relationships. I think by the time we're going into an arbitration or a mediation, we probably don't have very good relationships between those parties at that point in time anyway. So arbitration can cost a little more, takes a little longer. It has either one party wins or the other does, or they can split it somehow, but the arbitrators control the outcome. The parties don't have any say. The arbitrator says this is the final thing. It gives you definite closure, and as you're saying, it could harm relationships. So here's a question: who can file an ethics complaint? And it used to say anyone can file an ethics complaint, and they actually modified that rule fairly recently to say any real person can file an ethics complaint. And the reason for that is someone somewhere in the country said to someone once, if you keep doing that, my office is going to file a complaint against you. Well, an office can't file a complaint. Only a real person can file a complaint. So they actually changed the language in the Code of Ethics at one of those meetings of the National Association to say any real person can file an ethics complaint. So it could be a customer, it could be a client, it could be another realtor, anyone can file a complaint. So there's two steps in the process. The first is complaints come into the grievance committee. So the grievance committee's job is to take what's written up and says, if everything that was presented here is true, would it be a violation of the Code of Ethics? So it might be that somebody alleges that the person yelled at them and used profanity. And they think that's unethical behavior, so they file for a violation. Do you know nowhere in the Code of Ethics does it say you shall not yell or use profanity with your client? It's just not there. So the grievance committee would have to kick that complaint out. I happen to know that because I was the chair of the grievance committee many years back when that exact thing happened. And we had to say to the person, we're not saying this was good behavior. We think it was terrible behavior. However, it didn't violate any of the 17 articles of the Code of Ethics. It's not specific. So the grievance committee has to say what's written, if it's a violation. So if something comes in saying they violated an advertising thing because they put an ad on Craigslist saying it was for sale by owner, they're not the owner of the property, but they falsely said that it was, okay, the grievance committee would say, yep, that falls within Article 12. We should then send it forward to the Professional Standards Committee for a hearing. So they either dismiss or send for a hearing, but they can't do any investigation on it. They can only take what's written and say, we have two choices: send it forward for a hearing, send it back. And in some specific cases, they can just issue a citation. If something is a real clear cut, like an advertising thing, somebody says, I'm the top producer in Santa Barbara, and they've sold 2 houses. Well, we know that didn't make them the top producer in Santa Barbara. That's false advertising. They could just issue a citation to the person and not require a hearing because it's just black and white what they advertise in the newspaper. If they don't want to pay the amount, they could ask for a hearing, or they could just pay the fine and be done with it. So the grievance committee does have that on some very clear-cut cases, the ability to do a citation. Otherwise, they send it on to the Professional Standards Committee that holds a hearing. So following that hearing, the panel decides whether the Code of Ethics has been violated, proven through clear, strong, and convincing evidence. Now see, that's a little different again from the court of law. Court of law says you have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The Code of Ethics has to be proven through clear, strong, and convincing evidence. If a code violation is found, then the panel also determines the discipline for that person. So the discipline can be a letter of warning, a letter of reprimand, could be education, it could be a fine not exceeding $15,000. That number looks familiar, doesn't it? Same amount that the MLS. MLS violations can go up to $15,000. Fines in the association can go up to $15,000. And they change at different times. When it went from $10,000 to $15,000, I think that happened in the Code of Ethics first, and then the following year, the MLS followed suit and raised theirs. They can have probation, they could be suspended, they could be expelled. If they violated MLS rules, there can be a suspension or termination of MLS privileges. But they can't be kicked out of the MLS for a violation of the code of ethics. It has to be a violation of the MLS rules. It has to be kept separately. So one of the things is on this, it doesn't have to be just one of these. They can be layered or multiples. So there can be, so education as an example, it might be, we're going to require that person to come to a live code of ethics class because they're just not getting it. And we're going to have a fine. Okay, so that's good. So they can have both. But they could even layer on top of that saying, if they don't complete the education and pay the fine within 60 days, then we're going to suspend their membership. So it can be, it's not just one of these, it can be any combination thereof. So the primary emphasis of the code is to heighten awareness and appreciation. All right, so here's another question for you before we talk about arbitration, see if you know this one. So I'll leave this one up for a little longer. It says, who can file an arbitration case? Is it 1, a broker of one office against a broker of a different office? 2, a client against a broker? 3, a salesperson against a broker of the same office? Or 4, a salesperson of an office against a salesperson or broker of a different office? So if you think it's 1 and 2, you would answer A. If you think it's 1, 2, and 3, you would answer B. If you think it's 1, 3, and 4, you would answer C. And if it's all of them, you would answer D. So because it's a little more complicated, you have to read through them. I'm going to leave it up for a second before I open the poll. All right, so the poll is open. All right, so I've again got 5. There's 6. All right, so I've got in the polling. So we ended up with 4 C's and 2 D's. Is that your final answers? All right. So there's our results. 4 C's, 2 D's. And the answer is A. So let's talk about that. So why are we not going to have 3 or 4? So 3 says a salesperson against a broker of the same office. So first off, in the eyes of the law, and as it deals with things, and as we see it also as the association, is the office is one entity, that the broker and everyone under them is considered an entity. It's not separated. So therefore, a salesperson in the office, maybe they don't like their commission split, whatever, that's not something we're going to arbitrate. That's something that just has to be worked out between the broker and the salesperson. So a salesperson can't file against them. But how about number 4? Salesperson one office is a salesperson or broker of a different office. Well, the question becomes, who can pay a salesperson? And hopefully you all know that the only person who can pay you is your broker. So how could a salesperson file an arbitration if they cannot legally receive payment? So a salesperson or a broker of a different office cannot pay a salesperson from the first office. So if it's illegal for them to pay them, how could they ever file an arbitration? So arbitrations must be filed from one broker against another broker. But it can also be that a client can file against the broker. So it's either one or two are the correct answers. Okay. So how do we file these arbitration cases then? Is that Article 17 provides all the information about filing an arbitration. And arbitration occurs in the following circumstances, which are contractual or specific non-contractual disputes as defined by Standard Practice 17-4 between realtors arising out of the relationship as realtors. And the clients may also arbitrate. But you see where it says between realtors, it says the principals. The principals of the office would be the brokers. So we have times where sometimes an agent will come in and say, I want to file an arbitration against this agent from another company. And our first thing we say is, you need to go back to your broker. And your broker can file an arbitration, but you personally can't file an arbitration. And then sometimes the broker can work with the other broker and they work it out, and we don't have to have an arbitration at all because the two brokers will work out the issues between themselves. Okay, so if there is a hearing to be held by the Professional Standards Committee, they conduct a full due process hearing. So what does it mean to be a due process hearing? It means that both sides have the ability to provide witnesses, to do cross-examination, to provide evidence in written form, and to have been given the written form in advance of the hearing so they have time to respond back, etc. The hearings that are made up of, the hearing panel is made up of members from the Professional Standards Committee, and it's a tribunal, meaning there's 3 members. So there's usually actually 4 members in the room. We usually have an alternate there just in case one of the 3 members gets sick or something. We don't have to start over because there needs to be a tribunal that hears the case. And then after a hearing, the panel decides which party is entitled to the award based on the preponderance of evidence. Now see, under an ethics case, it was clear and convincing, but here it's the preponderance of evidence, meaning that which side had the most. So you take that scale of justice and weigh it out on the 2 sides to see who had the most, the best evidence on that. And based on that, the panel can say, we're going to give it all to one side, or only some to one, split it all to the other, whatever they feel is appropriate. So an unpaid award can be judicially enforced. I mean, the courts recognize that our arbitration cases are valid and legitimate, and that if somebody doesn't pay, you could go to court to get an order to hold their wages or something else to get enforcement on that. Some associations require that monies be deposited up front. We don't. We have had cases here where the amount of money in question is hundreds of thousands of dollars because it was on a very large transaction. And we don't require them to put that money in the bank with us. But if they lose, they do have to be able to pay that back out. Failure to pay can result in suspension of membership. That's something that wasn't in the rules until just about 2 or 3 years ago when that was added. And at the time, we all kind of went like, well, of course, that makes sense. But it had never been in there before. So that was one of those new ones that came out from one of the meetings of the National Association. So the arbitration guidelines are found in the Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual, gives the hearing panels guidance on resolving those issues. And the focus is primarily on procuring cause as the basis for resolving most commission disputes. So before I define procuring cause, I think we should ask you what procuring cause is. So per the procuring cause rules, commission is owed to, is it A, the one who first mentioned a property to a buyer, as long as he or she has a signed agency disclosure? Is it B, the one who showed the property to the buyer? Is it C, the one who wrote the accepted offer? Or D, procuring cause rules don't say? So let me open up that poll again. Get in your mind what you want of the A, B, C, or D. And then I will pop this up for you. All right, I've got 6 answers. I've got 4 A's, 2 B's. See, it's just too bad you can't all be standing in the corners as I tell you the answer is D, procuring cause don't say. So here's what the results you gave: 4 A's, 2 B's. Okay, so let's talk about these various ones. A has a little bit of a misleading terminology in there. It says the one who first mentioned the property as long as he or she has a signed agency disclosure. So you're required to give an agency disclosure to a buyer that says what is a buyer's agent, what is a seller's agent, and what is a dual agent. But if it is said, if they have a signed buyer-broker contract, then A would be a correct answer. But since it's a signed agency disclosure, A is not correct, because all that's saying is that you got that. B, the one who showed the property to the buyer, it'd be great that whoever showed got paid. C, the one who wrote the accepted offer, that'd be great. But procuring cause, what it says is every case has to be held on its own merits. And let me explain to you why it isn't the one who first mentioned it, showed it, or even wrote the accepted offer. Say that I had shown a property to someone, or first of all, I tell somebody about a property. Let me tell you about this house on 123 Main Street. And they go, well, that's really nice, thank you. You know, I was at an open house and I told them about it, but they've already been working for a month with another agent. Shouldn't they be able to go back to their other agent and say, hey, I just heard about this house at 123 Main Street. Can you tell me more about it? And they work with their agent that they've already developed a relationship with. So just mentioning it doesn't create a contractual agreement for payment. But how about the one who showed the property? Well, say I met a client for the first time and I took him out today and I showed him 6 properties. And I actually had 8 that I was going to show them, but after 6, they said, that's enough, thank you. Let's just go back. And the reason for that was they think I'm a bumbling idiot and they don't want me to represent them. Shouldn't they have that right? They shouldn't be locked into having to work with an agent they're not happy with if they are, you know, they don't be locked in just because they showed the property. So a client has to have the right to pick who they want to work with on this biggest decision of their lifetime of where they're going to live and who's going to represent them on that transaction. But wouldn't it make sense that the one who wrote the accepted offer should get paid? And 99% of the time they do. So that's almost an accurate one. But let me tell you about a specific case that happened when I owned a real estate office. One of our members of our office was working with a client and had worked with them for months and had developed the kind of rapport that you want to have with your client, that they're going to work together. And he had been checking daily for a home in a specific neighborhood, specific type of property, whatever, and he sees that one just popped up. So he calls the listing agent and said, I've got a client for this house, how can I show it? And they said, the first showings aren't going to be until the open house on Sunday. That the sellers are painting, they're going to recarpet, they're doing landscape work. He says they are working their tails off to get this property ready. He says, I wouldn't be surprised if they're still putting flowers in the backyard when I'm holding the open house on Sunday. But he says, clearly they have asked me to assure them that no one will see the house until 1 o'clock on Sunday. So he talks to his client, tells them about the house. They drive by it and go, yep, from the outside, it looks perfect. We definitely want to see it on Sunday at the open house. And our agent says, well, here's a dilemma I have. I'm holding an open house on one of my listings. But here's my card. Make sure you tell the agent you're working with me. And if you like it, just get back in touch with me and I'll write it up for you and we'll get you that house. Everything sounds good so far, right? No problems. Well, our agent holds his open house and it goes well. A buyer comes in that's interested. He ends up writing an offer for that buyer. He then has to go to the seller and do a counter offer, and he goes back to the buyer and he's working it back and forth, finally gets his transaction wrapped up around 10 o'clock at night. And then he realizes, wow, I never heard from my other client who was looking at that house. So he says, well, it's 10 o'clock now, it's too late. So he calls him on Monday morning and he says, you know, I thought that house was going to be perfect for me. I'm just shocked I didn't hear from you. He says, did you like the house? And they said, we loved it. That's why we bought it. And he says, wait a minute, what do you mean you bought it? He says, I thought you wanted me to represent you. And they said, yeah, that's right. We do want you to represent us. And the other agent said, it's okay. He can write it up, but you'll still be our representative. And our agent said, we don't have such an agreement. That's crazy. That doesn't happen in this business. And they go, oh, well, we didn't know. That's what he told us. Well, he got them to write an offer through fraud. So should the one who wrote the accepted offer get paid? In that case, no. 99% of the time, yes. But there was that 1%er where just because he wrote the offer doesn't mean that he was due the compensation. So we were able to get that deal unwrapped. I called the other broker who then we agreed that deal needed to be canceled and rewritten by our agent representing the buyer and writing it on behalf of the buyer rather than having the listing agent writing it on behalf of the seller in their best interest. And they renegotiated the deal and it all worked out. On that particular case, our agent didn't file an ethics complaint because we went straight to the Department of Real Estate, who ended up taking that guy's license because of his fraudulent action. But anyway, so that's why procuring cause rules say you've got to just look at the full totality of the situation. And the bottom line usually is, what did the buyer want to have happen? Because sometimes somebody will say, but wait a minute, I was working with them first and that agent stole them from me and whatever. It's like, yeah, but what did the buyer want? Because there's times where the buyer says, yeah, I know I started working with them, but I didn't want to continue working with them. Okay, well, the buyer has that right. All right, so on procuring cause, as we just mentioned, there's no predeterminers. You have to consider the entire course of events. That writing an offer, showing, et cetera, does not necessarily give somebody the right to the money. All right, so now we're going to run through the 17 articles that are in here. Article 1 says that you have a duty to protect and promote your client's interest. Your obligation to your client is primary. You need to treat all parties honestly regardless of agency or non-agency relationships. Standard Practice 1-2 defines terms such as client, customer, agent, broker, etc. So I'm sure you've all heard of your fiduciary duty to your client. That's Article 1. It's your duty to do what's in your client's best interest, to follow their direction as long as it's ethical and legal. So if they tell you don't disclose something that legally has to be disclosed, then your job is to disclose it, not to follow their direction. But if they give you a direction that is legal and ethical, then it's your duty to do it the way they want it done, because you're working for them. And so you will hear in your career people saying things like, man, I am working with a seller from hell right now. That is so inappropriate, because how is that looking out for that client's best interest? Because now as a buyer's agent, you might steer your client away from that property going, I've heard the seller's very unreasonable and you probably don't want to work with them. Well, that's not, that listing agent should never have said something like that. But let me give you an example of something that could be problematic for you. Say you just got an appointment for your first listing presentation, and you go out and meet with these people, and it's a Glida tract house that everything in that neighborhood has been selling between $825 and $850 on these homes. Maybe it's in El Encanto Heights or Santa Barbara Shores or someplace like that. And you meet with the seller and they say, oh, I like you, and I think I'll list my house with you as long as you'll do it for $900,000. And you say, I don't think that's in your best interest. I think you should be more like $850. Because that's where things are selling. I mean, that's what the buyers are willing to pay. And you've got your market analysis. You can show them in writing. Here's what the competition is. Here's what's recently sold. You've got all that information for them. And they're adamant. They're saying, nope, I'm not going to list for anything less than 900. And they agree. Maybe they go to 899 because it sounds better. But they won't drop to 850. And they said, as a matter of fact, we have another agent we just interviewed that says they'd be glad to take the listing at 900. So if you don't want to take the listing, we'll just list with them. And you're picturing in your mind the sign in the yard and the ads in the paper and the internet advertising that you get to do, and your name showing up on Zillow and Realtor.com, and all these different things are going to happen with your first listing. And you're going, well, how about if we talk about maybe doing a price reduction down the line sometime? They go, yeah, we'd be open to maybe talk about that, but we're adamant that it's got to be, we're going to go at 900 for a while. So you finally agree, I want to take the listing. So you take the listing and you put it on broker tour. And one of the agents that walks in comes out, the first agent that comes in says, oh, I was excited to see a $900,000 house in this neighborhood. I figured it had to be totally, I almost said totally remodeled. It had to be extensively remodeled to be a $900,000 house in this neighborhood. How did you come up with this price? What do you want to say? Anybody have an answer? If the agent says to you, how did you come up with that price? Just unmute yourself and throw it out there, anybody.
That's what my seller told me to list it for, and we agreed on a price reduction down the road if necessary.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. If somebody said that to you, would you not have come away with saying, the listing agent just told me the house is overpriced?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't mean to put you on the spot, because that's the answer all of us would want to give. But here's the deal. If you say that, are you breaching your Article 1 duty to protect and promote your client? Are you looking out for their best interest when you say that I listed the price they wanted, implying that you didn't agree with them? No, I mean, it's a tough situation. So I mean, the bottom line on that one is, I always recommended to agents when I train them that you might have to spend hours or maybe days working with a client to show them the comps, et cetera, to get them to understand the pricing and get it priced right. But that taking an overpriced listing is potentially, it's not in your client's best interest to do that, and it's going to hurt you and them. But I got to tell you, if somebody comes in and says, how'd you come up with that price? You'd have to just say things like, well, have you noticed that this backyard's about 10 feet wider than most of the neighborhood? Did you see they have a new faucet in the kitchen? I mean, they're going to think you're a nut maybe, but you've got to do everything you can to, in a positive way, market that house, because that's your duty to your client. And I got to tell you, it's not always going to be easy. But here's my recommendation to all of you, and that is, anytime you talk about your listings, about your buyer clients, anything you're doing when you're representing someone, is you do it as if they're sitting on your shoulder listening to every word you're saying. And when you're done, they say, good job, I like the way you represented me there. But I got to tell you, in your career, you're going to hear it all the time. Well, that's what the client wanted. I'm dealing with a client from hell. Whatever. Don't do it. Ethics say you've got to protect and promote your client's interest, look out for their best interest at every step of the way. Okay, Article 2, disclose, disclose, disclose. Now, before you got into business, you probably heard that your dude, real estate is all about location, location, location. But what I'm here to tell you is it's about disclosure, disclosure, disclosure once you're in the business. So let's talk about that a little more. Article 2 says you have to avoid exaggeration, misrepresentation, and concealment of pertinent facts about the property or the transaction. Okay, those words in red, to me, those are those big fancy words meaning lying, right? Don't be lying to people. Just tell it like it is. You don't have any obligation to discover latent defects or matters outside the scope of your license or things that are not under your agency relationship. So what do we mean by latent defects? A latent defect is something that isn't visible upon normal examination. So as an example, I put my finger down on the table. I left a fingerprint there, but you can't see it. If I use fingerprint dust, it'll now show up. A latent defect in the house is something that isn't visible. You haven't seen it. And that's why you don't want to go in the attic with the physical inspector. You don't want to go under the floor with the termite guy, whatever. That's not part of your job. But if you see anything, you now have a disclosure that you are obligated to disclose. So if your seller says, I know you were here when they pulled up the carpet and you saw the crack in the slab, but I got to tell you, we put some epoxy in there, we fixed it up real nice, and now you don't have to disclose it to anybody. Do you have to disclose it? The answer is absolutely, you have to disclose it. It's a requirement. If something happens where you have knowledge, it needs to be disclosed. And it might be something that's involved in the transaction, not just something that happens with the house. Let me give you an example of something that might happen. You're working with the buyer, you have an accepted offer, and to get that accepted offer, you'd already taken them to a lender, you had a pre-qualification letter. ABC Lending says, we pre-qualify this client for this price range and things, and everything looks good. So you now present your offer, and you have a 17-day time frame to do all of your inspections, get loan approval, etc. And about 10 days in, the lender comes back and said, I'm shocked, but the underwriter just said no on this loan. Now, one thing you need to understand about the loan process is the loan officer is a commission-based person that is going to give you best advice of what they think the underwriter is going to say, but they're not the one that makes the determination whether the bank actually makes that loan or not. The underwriter, who's not commission-based but paid a salary, is the one who their job depends on not taking risky loans. And so maybe that underwriter says, I see something here I think is too much risk, we're going to say no on this loan. So you're now in the situation where you're 10 days into your 17-day contingency, just found out that the lender's not going to make the loan. But the loan officer says to you, I feel really bad because I pre-qualified you. I think I said everything's going to happen okay. I happen to know that XYZ lender down the street doesn't look at all the same issues the same way we do. And that on this particular one, on maybe the debt ratio or whatever it happens to be, they're more lenient than we are. So I'm pretty sure they'll approve the loan. So let me give you the entire loan package. I'll give you back the application, the tax returns, the appraisal that was already done, take it down to XYZ lender, and they could process in time to get your loan approval within your 17-day time frame. So you go, okay, cool. We're going to meet that contingency. I have a question for you. For anybody that wants to answer, is should you notify the seller's agent that the loan was just not approved when you fully believe that you'll have a loan approved within 17 days and you have a 17-day contingency to make this happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the answer is, David, absolutely. You should. You should make that disclosure. And here's why.
Okay.
Put yourself in the seller's position. If that seller's sitting there thinking, I had pre-approval, we're sure everything's okay, and they now are making an offer on another property. They now are arranging movers. They're now turning off utilities, on and on and on. All the things that sellers have to do, they're working those things out under the belief that everything is fine. And if they find out later everything wasn't fine at day 10, and on day 17 you're now canceling after I just entered into a contract which I'm going to be found in breach of, either with a mover or with another house or with whatever, they're going to be damaged. So as a seller, you don't want to be damaged because somebody didn't tell you something. So by all means, that would be a disclosure item. So don't think of disclosure just as about the house. It's about the transaction. And the test always is, for information about the house, if I was the buyer, would I want to know about that? And if the answer is yes, then make sure it gets disclosed. If it's about the transaction, is it something that either the buyer or the seller, depending on which side you're representing, would want to know about? Put yourself in their shoes. If you say, yes, I'd want to know that, then guess what? You have a disclosure item. So it's a little bit on the complicated side, and I got to tell you that there are times people don't make as many disclosures as they should. You're better off over-disclosing than under-disclosing. Now, as I say that, I saw a house one time where the client went through on their disclosure and listed every single defect they could find in the house. They were disclosing things like a crack in a light switch cover, which was a 39-cent item. That did not need to be disclosed. But because it was such a long list, the buyer panicked and said, wow, this house has a lot of problems. So when I say over disclosure is better than under disclosure, not to the point where you scare somebody off because you're disclosing things that just don't have to be disclosed. So be reasonable, be fair, but don't, ask yourself, if I was the buyer, would I want to know? Do you care about the light switch cover? Probably not. Okay, so don't have to worry about that. But that should be your guide. All right, Article 3, cooperate with other brokers except when cooperation is not in the client's best interest. The obligation to cooperate does not include the obligation to share commissions, fees, or to otherwise compensate another broker. So what we're saying here is that you need to play fair. You need to be reasonable. You need to be cooperating with others. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't take a listing and keep it as an office exclusive. The rules allow that. Under our clear cooperation, you can keep an office exclusive as long as you never market that property to the public. I don't understand why you would ever do that, because how could that be in the seller's best interest to list their house but not market it? But that could be done. So you don't have to provide compensation or share commission. It doesn't have to be split in any certain way, whatever. But it does mean you have to cooperate. So say, as an example, we have this case. Your client calls and says, hey, I just saw a sign for sale in the neighborhood we've been looking at. Can you tell me about it? And you look up that street and you don't find it. It's like, it doesn't exist. I don't know what happened here. And so you ask them, well, was there any name on the sign? I don't know. Well, what color was the sign? I don't know. All they know is there was a for sale sign out front of the house. So you now drive by, you see the sign, you see the person's name, you call that agent and say, hey, my client just saw this house, I'd like to show it to them. And they said, yeah, well, this one is not being submitted to the MLS yet because it's not ready for showing, which is now in violation of rules. It wasn't up until the 1st of May. So now they'd have 24 hours to get in the MLS, but they said, so there's not going to be any showings until next Sunday. You go, oh, okay. So you call your client back and say, sorry, we can't see it till next Sunday. They're going, well, today's Monday. I don't want to wait till next Sunday. So on their own, they call the listing agent and said, hey, I just saw that the sign on your house. How do I see it? The guy says, well, would you like to see it today? He says, well, I'd love to. He says, okay, I'll show it to you. So that listing agent now is trying to double in this transaction and is willing to show it to clients, but not show it through other agents. That could potentially be a violation of Article 3, because Article 3 requires cooperation unless it's not in the client's best interest. Well, wouldn't it be in the client's best interest to let everybody who has an interest in this property see it and get the most money for it? Now, when I say it might be a violation, it may not be, because what if the seller gives a directive to the listing agent? I want to hold this off the market until Sunday and not allow showings. But if you have somebody, I'm okay with you showing it, but I just don't want everybody seeing the house between now and Sunday. Now the agent did nothing wrong, because the client never told me he's working with another agent, didn't say he's the same one that had the agent call. And so a client calls you and wants to see a property. You don't have to say, oh, by the way, are you working with another agent? I mean, check with your broker, because they may want you to, but there's no legal or ethical requirement to ask every single person you meet. I mean, if you meet somebody and they say, hey, I'd like to look at some houses with you, you don't have to say, have you already looked at houses with somebody else? I mean, if they want to work with you, that's great. So anyway, it may or may not be a violation based on the circumstances. Okay, Article 4, advise in writing prior to an executed contract that you are a buyer or related to a buyer in the transaction, or that the buyer is from your firm. And when selling, realtor shall disclose their ownership interest. So what the deal is here is that if you're going to buy a house, and by the way, I highly recommend you buy as much as you can, that you have to disclose in writing that you are in fact a real estate licensee, acting as the principal in this transaction. There's nothing wrong with you representing yourself. Check with your broker. They might have a different opinion on that. But as far as the code of ethics is concerned, you can represent yourself, but it must be put in there that you are in fact a licensee. And that's why it says, or buyers from your firm, because it might be you have someone else write it up on your behalf, but they still have to say the actual buyer is a licensee, even though it's not them that's writing it up. So just be aware of that. It has to be in writing prior to the execution of the contract. Now, what's it mean to be prior to the execution? How do you notify them before there's a contract? It doesn't say before there's a contract, it says before the execution of the contract. Execution of a contract is when it's signed by all parties. So all you have to do in the other terms and conditions section of the contract, write in, seller is aware the buyer is a real estate licensee. Done. It's covered. You've met your requirements here. Or if you're selling, if it's not done by the buyer's agent when they write the offer, then you have to give a counter offer saying buyer is aware that seller is a real estate licensee, acting on their own behalf in this transaction, or whatever language. Check with your broker about the exact language. But you've got to disclose if you are in fact a participant. Now, when I say I highly recommend you buy and sell property, I want to make a statement to you right now, and that is, you pay your bills by selling real estate. You build wealth by owning real estate. You, as a real estate practitioner, are going to have a better knowledge of what is a good buy and what isn't a good buy. And if there's something out there that makes economic sense for you to buy and you have the financial ability, I highly recommend that you buy. And then you can, even if it's a small unit of some kind, then you can exchange later into something bigger by using 1031 tax deferred exchanges. The broker I went to work for said, here's my recommendation for all of you, and that is buy a property every year. And then do that for 20 years, and then you could sell a property every year that now has 20 years worth of appreciation in them as you sell them. Would that be a pretty good retirement plan? Yeah, what's even better is just keep buying and then exchanging into bigger things and pay off loans and have good income from that. Because how many of you have a retirement plan when you're in real estate? As an independent contractor, it's going to be up to you. So me personally, my retirement plan is owning real estate. And I think I'll brag a little bit, and that's the point that we're at about 130 doors. We have 123 out of state and 7 locally. So I'm at a point now where I could retire if I wanted to, because I've got enough income coming in off my properties. But just remember, you pay your bills by selling real estate, you build wealth by owning real estate. So keep that in mind. You should be buying properties, but make sure you disclose when you do.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to know, where do you own out of state?
In Kentucky. Just happened to be that we found a property there as a second home. And so we go there pretty regularly, and then started realizing that the rate of return is like 3 times as much rent for the amount of you can buy a property for here. The difference is, though, things don't appreciate there like they do here. So all of our holdings were in the Santa Barbara area originally, and they all had good appreciation that gave us then money to put down payments on, you know, a 27-unit apartment complex, a 24-unit complex, you know, those kinds of things out of one house here locally. So my recommendation is do it locally first, build that appreciation, build your war chest, and then maybe go offsite when you're ready to retire. Okay, Article 5, realtors should not undertake to provide professional services concerning a property or its value where they have a present or contemplated interest unless such interest is specifically disclosed. There are times where, say I want to buy the neighbor's house because they won't trim the trees or let me trim the trees, and so I want to buy their house, but I'm afraid that if I tell them that I'm the buyer, that they won't sell to me because we've had a dispute over these trees already. So I have a friend of mine put it in their name, knowing that they'll just substitute me in at the end. Well, Article 5 says, even though I don't have my name on there being the buyer, we've got to disclose that I'm gonna be the buyer and that I have an interest in this property. So you can't pull a straw buyer deal and get away with it, that kind of thing. So be upfront, be honest, just tell it like it is. That's the ethical thing to do. Article 6 says, do not accept any commission, rebate, or profit on any expenditure made for or by your client without your client's knowledge and consent, and disclose any financial benefits received when recommending real estate products or services. So one exception to that is you can refer a client and get a referral fee because it's not costing them anything extra. The referral fee is paid out of the proceeds that the listing agent or selling agent would be getting anyway. And it's just a split of that money. So you don't have to make a written disclosure to a client that you're getting a referral fee. But I do recommend, if you're referring somebody and you're going to get paid for it, I highly recommend you tell them. I've had more times in my business where I say, I can help you find a great agent in Spokane, Washington, or I can help you find an agent in San Diego, wherever it is that they're going to try to do some business. And they go, no, I don't want to put you out. And I go, you're not putting me out. They're going to actually pay me a referral fee for doing this, and I will do the research to get you a top-notch agent so you don't just get whoever you happen to get. They go, oh, okay, as long as you're getting paid for it, then please do it. So I found it interesting that people didn't want me to do it for free, and that if I told them I was being paid, it was actually a plus. But on referral fees, you don't have to. But on other things, if you're getting some kind of kickback, it has to be disclosed. So as an example, if you I had a situation where I was recommending a carpet cleaner because he did a great job. He would do it for less money than most of the other people around, things of that sort. And so he was good, and I recommended him to sellers all the time because it's typical they need to clean their carpets before they put their house on the market. So he came to me one day and said, boy, you've recommended me so many times. He says, I think it's been 5 already. He says, tell you what, he says, I'll give you 10% off your carpet cleaning for everybody you recommend to me. So as of right now, I'll give you 50% off yours. You give me 5 more referrals, I'll clean your house for free. And I thought, well, that's very nice of you to offer that. But if I accept any compensation, I would now have to make a written disclosure to every one of my clients. Oh, by the way, I'm recommending this carpet cleaner, but I've got something in it for me. I'm getting a kickback in reduction of my carpet cleaning. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to have to turn the guy down. But here's a recommendation I have for you is do what I did on that one, is turn it into a benefit. What I said to him was, I don't want to accept carpet cleaning, but here's what I want you to do. Every time I recommend somebody to you, I want you to give them a bid. And then once they give the bid, I'm going to tell them to let you know that they were my client. And then you give them 10% off of their carpet cleaning. So now they got the Bob Hart discount, which was worth a whole lot more to me of that goodwill that they felt over that happening than if I ever would have received a kickback myself. So just be aware, if you receive any commission, rebate, or profit on anything you're doing in this business that could affect your client, you have to make a disclosure. And you will sometimes be given forms from some of the bigger companies saying, we need to have this form signed on this transaction. You're going like, well, what's all this about? And it says that this broker who owns this real estate company also owns a title company and a termite company and whatever. And if you have to do business with any of them, they by law must disclose that relationship. So they just disclose everything to everyone every time. So if you get those forms, that's what it's all about. Article 7, do not accept compensation for more than one party, even if permitted by law, without disclosure to all parties and informed consent of the clients. So you might work under buyer brokerage where you have an agreement that this buyer is going to pay you a commission for selling the house. The seller is offering a commission through the MLS that's maybe less than the amount the buyer agreed to pay you. So now you accept that amount from the seller and the buyer makes up the difference. So now you're getting compensation for more than one party. That's legal. It's not a problem. It just now needs to be disclosed. So you give a disclosure to both sides, the buyer and the seller, saying, you know, here's how much the buyer's paying me, here's how much the seller's paying me. And it's all above board and out in the open, not a problem. The only problem you'd have is if you did that without disclosure. Article 8, do not commingle clients' money with your own or your firm's money. The number one reason that brokers have their licenses suspended by the Department of Real Estate is mishandling of client funds. So it's in the Code of Ethics and it's in the law that you shall not ever take client money and mix it with your own personal money. So a broker can have a broker trust account where they put monies, and they can have a trust account has 100 different clients all having their monies in the same account, but it can't contain any of the broker's money. Actually, it can contain up to $100 to cover fees like checks being ordered and things like that. But it has to be kept separate. So you might say, well, that doesn't really matter to me. I don't do property management. That's really my broker's issue. Yeah, it generally is. But here's where it could happen to you. A client calls and says, I've got this house in Carpinteria that's been a rental for the last 10 years. I live in Colorado. It's going to be hard for me to get out there and take a look at it, but my tenant just gave notice. So I'm trying to decide, should I re-rent it? Should I sell it? And to make that determination, I need a good market analysis to determine what the sales price could be and what rents would be now. And then also, if you could give me an idea of what kind of things I would need to do to fix it up to make it most saleable. So they say, sure, I'll be glad to do that. So they left a key under the mat. You go there and you go, actually, as tenants go, they left this place pretty nice. So everything's in pretty good shape. except there's three things. One is carpets really should be professionally cleaned. The second is there's a drippy faucet at the kitchen sink. And man, in these times of drought, that looks bad. You can say, if you didn't fix a drippy faucet, what else is wrong with this house? So you'd want to replace that faucet. And then the front door has some peeling paint. The rest of the paint looks good, but the front door itself has some peeling paint. You're thinking, man, that's first impressions. You want to make a good first impression, so a good coat of paint on the front door would be good. So as a good agent, you not only do a good market analysis, but you call around and you find out what it's going to cost to clean the carpets, what it's going to cost to paint the front door, and what it's going to cost for a new faucet. And to make things simple, I'm going to say each one of those items is $150. So it's going to cost the seller $450. So you now give them the market analysis. You tell them what things could rent for, what it would sell for. And he goes, wow, I didn't realize it had gone up that much. Yeah, if that's the case, then I definitely want to sell it because there's some property here in Colorado I'm looking at, and I'd rather have my investments closer to me. And so, yeah, let's put it on the market. And he said, so you say, yep, I'll send you a listing contract. And said, oh, by the way, here's the three things I think should be done. And he goes, yeah, that sounds great. If you can just take care of that, that'd be wonderful. So he says, I'll put a check for $450 in the mail to you today. And then you can just pay those guys when they get the work done. So you say, fine, full service. So he sends you a check, which you put into your personal checking account. Now you pay out of that $150 to the plumber, $150 to the painter, and $150 to the carpet cleaner. And you just violated Article 8 and state law, for which you might lose your license because you commingled $450 of your client money with your own personal funds. So if you had that situation arise, that hypothetical I just made up, what you'd want to do is say, nope, don't send me a check for $450 made out to me. Send me 3 checks for $150, one made out to the plumber, one made out to the carpet cleaner, and one made out to the painter, and let them know I won't deliver them till the work's done, but don't send the money to me. That'd be fine. The other thing you could do, and I don't recommend this necessarily, and that is you could pay up front for those 3 things, and then the seller can reimburse you because now it's no longer commingled funds. It is now a reimbursement for expenses made. So that would be okay to do it that way. The only problem is, what if he never pays you? So that's why I would recommend he send you the checks to pay directly to those service providers and have the arrangement be made between the seller and those service providers, and you're just the facilitator of that happening. All right, so that's Article 8. Article 9, agreements shall be in writing whenever possible in clear and understandable language, expressing the specific terms, conditions, obligations, and commitments, and a copy of every agreement shall be furnished to each party upon their signing or initialing. So one thing that's really nice now in zip form is that when somebody signs a document, it automatically emails it to them. So you have an automatic furnishing to each party their documents. It used to be we'd have to fill that out and we'd have to literally tear out a 4-part form and give this one to the buyer and tear it out the one to give to the seller as they signed, etc. But agreements have to be in writing. So you're not going to list a house without it being in writing. You're not going to write you're not going to have somebody buy a house without it being in writing. But what are we talking about? So how about everything else? So you do a physical inspection and you want to now ask for work to be done. Well, you got to do that in writing. Request for repair form, etc. But let me give you a made-up case here. You have a physical inspection contingency of 17 days. You call your favorite inspector and they say, boy, I'm really booked up right now, but I can get there on day 17. Whatever that date is, you're giving them the date it has to be done by. And he says, and I bring my iPad, I do my inspection checkbox right on there, and I email it to you and your client immediately upon finishing the inspection. So you'll have it. You'll have that afternoon and evening then to to go over it, to make your request for repairs, and everything should be fine. Are you okay with me doing it on that last day? You go, yeah, I really like working with you, and the client's taking your recommendation, so yes, let's do that. Well, you get down to that day 17 now, and you get a call from the physical inspector saying, man, I got a problem. I got the stomach flu. And he said, I am not able to leave my house today. As a matter of fact, I'm having a hard time leaving one specific room in my house today. And so I'm not going to make it on this inspection. Can we possibly do it tomorrow? He says, I know it's only a 24-hour bug because it's already gotten my wife and both of my kids, and it was a 24-hour thing. They were okay. They were functional the next day. So I need to just say, can't do it today. So you call the listing agent, and the listing agent says, yeah, I understand, man. I had that same flu. It's nasty, but it's only 24 hours. So yeah, that's fine. Let's just do it the next day. We'll do it on day 18. So now on day 18, after your 17-day contingency timeframe, you have a physical inspection, and there's some things need to be done. So you send a request for repairs in through the listing agent, and the seller says, go pound sand. You had 17 days to do your physical inspection. I'm not doing anything because this is day 18. And you say, but wait a minute. I called your agent, and your agent said it was okay. He said, no one checked with me, wasn't okay with me. Where's the written document that gave an extension for that extra day? And you all go, blah, 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 because you don't have it. So, oops, you should have had it. Article 9 says all agreements need to be in writing. And you just violated Article 9, and you've got now clients that are unhappy with the way the transaction's going. They may file a complaint against you, and guess what? You're dead in the water because you didn't get the agreement in writing. Buyer's agent and seller's agent cannot contractually agree to anything. It has to be that the buyer and the seller agree in writing as to what's going on. All right, so that's Article 9. Before we go to Article 10, I get one more question for you. So we're going to talk about discrimination next. So here's a question. Sexual orientation and gender identity are protected classes where? Is it A, in state and federal law, but not in the Code of Ethics? Is it B, state law and the Code of Ethics, but not in federal law? Is it C, they aren't protected in any of the three? Or D, they're protected in all three? All right. So get in your mind which answer you want, and I will get a poll going here again. All right, poll is open. All right, that was quick. Thank you for that. Here's the answers. Share results. We have 5 Ds and 1 B. So D says they're protected in all three. B says state law and code, but not federal. Congratulations to our one winner that gave answer B. California state law protects sexual orientation and gender identity. Our national code of ethics protects sexual orientation and gender identity, but federal law does not. And state law does in about half the states and doesn't in half the states. So for us, it's quite simple that we follow that area and we make sure we don't discriminate on sexual orientation and gender identity. And we're in compliance both with the code and state law by doing so. But in other states, it's a little bit tricky because the code requires it of realtors, but state law doesn't require it of others. And so sellers could discriminate even though their agent cannot. So Article 10 says, do not discriminate against any person or persons on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. There was a very good film that was out recently, a video, about discrimination in Long Island. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but I will find it and have Stephanie email it to all of you, the link, so that you can look at it. It really makes discrimination come to the forefront. But here's a couple things on discrimination. One is, for years I've said to people, you know, here's the easy way to not discriminate, and that is, we don't care what color somebody is, what their race is, where they came from, what country they came from, what their sexual orientation is. If they have the financial ability to buy a house and they want to buy a house through you, they're your new best friend. And if you do that and just live by that, you're probably okay. But I've come to say it's not quite that simple. Let me give you an example of what could be considered discriminatory. We have a white agent working with a white couple and showing them property. And these folks are saying they want to buy a house up to $1.2 million. They have to have at least 3 bedrooms. They prefer 4. And they like 2-story houses, but they'll take a single story. And they start looking at property with the agent. And the agent's showing them property, and they want to be in the city of Santa Barbara. They don't want to be in Goleta or Carpenter. So the agent shows them property in San Racan and San Roque and San Roque Gardens and off La Cumbre area, areas like that. And they didn't find anything that was really a perfect house for them, but they settled for a 3-bedroom house in San Roque, because there's very few homes at $1.2 million range, you know, that were worth anything in that area. So they buy the house and they're happy they've got their new home. Then about a month later, they're driving through the west side and they come across this 2-story house for sale. And they see it and say, well, that's a nice looking house. I wonder how much it is. And they do some research and find out it's $1.2 million. And it's a 2-story with 4 bedrooms. They're going, oh man, too bad that wasn't on the market when we were looking, because that would have been perfect for us. And then they do some research and find out it's been on the market for 3 months. So they call their agent and said, well, why didn't you ever tell us about that house? And they said, oh, I didn't think you would like that neighborhood. Well, guess what just happened? We have what's called steering. We're saying, I think because of your ethnic background, I think you would be more happy over here. And they're steering them to the type of home they think, the agent, think is best for the buyer. That's racial discrimination, because there happen to be more minorities on the west side, and the agent made the determination that the buyer wouldn't want to live in that neighborhood. It's not right. As an agent, you need to let the client see all kinds of homes, all kinds of neighborhoods. You need to give them a wide variety. You can't put your feelings into your showings. What you need to do is find out what they want. Now, if they say to you, I don't feel comfortable in that neighborhood, I wouldn't want to buy there. Okay, then you don't have to show them houses there anymore, because they're directing you to that. But you can't make that determination on their behalf and end up guiding them to a home that isn't exactly what they wanted when they would have been happy in that other neighborhood. They might say, I want to live in a more diverse neighborhood. I don't want to be in this area that you steered me to. Okay, so racial discrimination doesn't just mean working with everybody no matter what they look like or where they come from. It's a matter that you don't do steering and or any other discriminatory action. Article 11, a lot more words on this page because it talks about you've got to conform to the standards of practice and competency in the area that you're engaged. And you shouldn't take on something unless you either have somebody working with you, you have the knowledge, etc. So it applies in a couple different ways. One is it's going to apply to you working with the type of client. Somebody says, I'm thinking of selling my liquor store. Can you help me with that? Well, a real estate licensee can sell business opportunities, even though they're not real property. So you say, well, sure, I can help you with that. As a matter of fact, I'm the business opportunity specialist in my office. That's because no one else knows anything about them. But do you know anything about them? Do you know how to properly value the goodwill, the length of the lease, the inventory? Is it wholesale? Is it sold at retail? And if it's done at wholesale, is it the price it was purchased for versus the price of that it would be cost to replace it today? You know, how much are the furnishings and shelves and everything else were, the cash register, etc. How do you properly value all of that? Do you have any idea? And if you don't, you shouldn't be engaged in that kind of activity. Now, it might be that your broker has experience with business opportunities and can help guide you. Great, then you're in fine shape. But if no one in your office has ever sold a business opportunity and you just try to take one on, you'd be in violation of Article 11 because you're not giving them the competent service that they deserve. So you can either co-list with someone, refer it to someone, whatever, but you just have to make sure you have the competency with what's going on. Now you might say, well, I've never sold a house before. Doesn't that mean I'm not competent to sell a house? Remember, the agency relationship attaches at the broker level. Has the broker sold a house before? Do they know how to do that? Can they help you with the transaction? You're working as a team, you're okay. The second one is having the competency in a different area. So you have a family member who wants to buy a home in Sacramento. And you say, well, I'll help you buy that house because you know, because they're family, they'll work with you. You know, maybe it's a cousin or something, but it's not in their best interest. It's not because you don't know the neighborhoods. You don't know what prices have been. You don't know the history that's going on. You might miss something like maybe they have a zoning information report. Maybe they have a sewer lateral inspection. Maybe there's something going on that you didn't know about in that community. Go, oh, but I'm from Santa Barbara. I didn't know about that. Yeah, but you're supposed to have the competency to know that if you're representing them there. So you would have to maybe refer them to a good agent, co-work with another agent, something like that to make sure they're properly represented. I one time got a phone call right here at the office from an agent saying, is there anything special I need to know about selling a house in Santa Barbara? And I said, absolutely there is. And she says, oh, good, what is it? And I go, I can't tell you that. And the reason was, there's a lot of stuff you need to know about different neighborhoods, different things happening, whatever. And if I start answering the questions, I now have liability in that transaction, and I can't put that liability on the Association of Realtors. So I just have to say, I can't help you. So I said, why are you asking me that question? She says, well, I'm an agent from Agora Hills, and I have a listing in Santa Barbara. And since I'm not that familiar with Santa Barbara, I'm not sure if there's anything special I need to know. And she says, and when I took the listing, I assumed that the buyer would be represented by a local agent and they would help make sure everything got taken care of. But as it turns out, the buyer is represented by an agent from San Diego. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is a listing agent from Agora Hills and a buyer's agent from San Diego selling a house in Santa Barbara? Clearly, we had an Article 11 violation there. That they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't take the right precautions. Now, the agent I dealt with from Agora Hills said, well, what do you think I should do? And I said, it sounds to me like you need to engage the services of a local agent and work with them to make sure that everything gets properly handled. She goes, yeah, but wouldn't I have to pay them something? I said, yeah, you probably do, but that's between you and them to work out. She goes, oh, okay. Yeah, I figured I was going to have to do that. So anyway, she was reasonable, and she did now. She's no longer in violation of Article 11 because she's getting the competency of somebody that's local. But just be aware of that. Don't go outside. You know, you've got a client that wants to buy in some other area. Yeah, your state license lets you sell anywhere in California, but that doesn't mean you should. Check with your broker, make sure that everything's good, but just be aware of Article 11 if you're going out of the area.
Can they use a consultant, Bob?
Could you use a consultant? That's a good question. Let me go back to this one. So it says, unless you engage the assistance of someone who is competent on such type service. So yeah, I would, so you could pay a consulting fee to a real estate practitioner. I'd be a little skeptical of using someone that's not licensed, but doesn't mean you'd have to pay them necessarily a half a year commission or something like that. And again, I'm not here to do any price fixing ideas by throwing out any kind of number like that. But talk to your broker, work that out, what would be reasonable to do that, to get advice. I mean, because there's agents who can work at any level as long as your broker is in agreement. Because remember, all contractual agreements on commission monies are done from broker to broker. Okay, any other questions, Steph? Okay. Article 12 requires truth and honesty in all real estate communications. So be honest and truthful. Present a true picture in your advertising, marketing, and representations, and ensure your status as a real estate professional is readily apparent. So if you can't run a blind ad in the newspaper as an example, saying this house is for sale and here's a phone number to call. It has to say in there either your company name or the fact that you're a licensee. It has to have some connotation there that the client's going to know that it's not a for sale by owner. So that has to be whether it's on social media or advertised anywhere else. But we have had things. I kind of threw out an example earlier of somebody does something where they advertise on Craigslist that this is a for sale by owner house when it's actually a listed house. Well, that's not a true picture. That's false advertising. So we actually had that happen one time. And there was a case filed against the person. And when they testified in their hearing, they asked, well, why would you do that? Why would you advertise? And he says, because I know there's a lot of buyers out there that aren't willing to talk to real estate agents, but they'll call sellers directly. So I just thought I'd get a lot more calls that way. It's like, yeah, you'll get more calls, but you're cheating and lying to get the more calls. That's not what this business is about. We're a profession of honesty, truthfulness, good ethics, etc. So that person had to pay for the fact that he made that bad judgment. Now, other areas in here could be things like putting ads out on about yourself, representing that, well, I've been in the business for 10 years when you haven't been. And for some reason, that seems to happen where people are puffing it up. They've only been in the business 9, but they say 10. Well, don't puff, just tell it like it is. If it's not in your best interest, just don't say anything about how long. But as you market property, make sure it's truthful. We had someone one time put an ad out for a house and called it a beach bungalow. And the picture that they used was a picture of the ocean. And then they had the information about the house, etc. Picture of the house and the bedrooms and baths, but the lead photo was of the ocean and the advertisement said beach bungalow. Well, guess what? The house was 3 blocks from the ocean and had no view of the ocean. But it was clearly misleading to a client who thought that it was beachfront property because of the way it was presented. And the agent said, well, I didn't mean to mislead anybody. I just put that in as the lead picture because that's the beach you can walk to. Well, no. That person was also found in violation of Article 12 because it wasn't a clear picture. It wasn't a true picture of what's going on. Now, if you say this is a great house 3 blocks from the ocean, and you show a picture of the house, and then also in there you show a picture of the beach you can walk to, that would not be a problem. But the way it was presented implied that it was a beachfront property, even though it never said that. Article 13, do not engage in activities that constitute the unauthorized practice of law and shall recommend legal counsel be obtained when the interest of any party to the transaction requires it. If you haven't looked closely at a purchase contract, or if you have, either way, you're going to realize when you do that it is full of text and very little space that you can write anything in. It used to be our contracts had just some basic text and then a lot of blank lines where we as agents had to write things in, but that got challenged because the attorneys in the state said, we as attorneys need to draft legal language. Real estate agents should not be drafting legal language. That's acting as an attorney when you're not an attorney. So over time, these forms have morphed into more pages because of it, but to spell out everything that can be spelled out possibly, and you just check the boxes that apply and things of that sort. So just so you know, that's why it's there, because these forms were drafted by attorneys and it's properly done, but you as a real estate salesperson are not doing the unauthorized practice of law of creating the language. Now you can do counter offers back because you're countering the language that's already in there, things of that sort. That's not a problem. But where you have to be more concerned these days is maybe on something that's outside of the contract. Say as an example, you have a buyer who, as part of the escrow process, gets a form asking, how do you want to take title? So you can either take title as joint tenancy, as tenants in common, as community property, you can put your house in a trust, etc. And so they come to you as an agent and say, well, how do you think I should take title? And you say, oh, I would take community property if I were you, because that way you get an automatic stepped up basis of the whole property upon the death of one of you. And so that's what I'd recommend. Well, you just gave legal advice. And so say, now, prior to anybody dying, the husband gets sued for something he did that the wife had no culpability in it at all. And they lose the lawsuit, and based on that, they end up losing their house. It's because they had community property, because under community property, the entire house is up for taking. If it had been joint tenancy, they could only go after his half. Her half would have been protected. But under joint tenancy, she wouldn't have gotten, or he wouldn't, whoever died first, would not have gotten a full stepped up basis. So the question is, are you more likely to be sued or to die? And in California these days, it's hard to make that call. So anyway, don't make a recommendation. What you have to say is, and let me give you some language, and that is, the manner in which you take title has significant tax and legal consequences. Therefore, I recommend you speak to an attorney and or an accountant as to how to take title. Now, does it sound like I've said that before? And the answer is yes, I've said that for 30 years because that's the answer. Don't, as an agent, you're a helper. You want to help people any way you can. You want to give them advice any way you can. But sometimes you have to say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you. Because that's what you have to do by law or by the code or whatever. So just be aware, think about it, make sure you're not giving legal advice, financial advice. Oh, I think you should do a 1031 tax deferred exchange on this. Well, what's their tax consequence? Maybe they don't have enough stepped up, their basis is high enough that they don't need to do a 1031 and they'd actually be better off not doing a 1031. So what you need to say is, have you considered a tax deferred exchange? And I recommend you speak with your accountant as to whether or not it makes sense under your circumstances. So recommend them to the proper professional, but don't try to be the one person who answers all of their questions. All right, Article 14. If you're charged with an unethical practice or asked to present evidence or cooperate in any other way in any professional standards proceeding, you shall place all pertinent facts before the proper tribunals. So maybe somebody else has had a charge against them and you're asked to be a witness, and you say, you know what, I don't want to get involved. I'm just not going to go in. Well, you're coming in because the next case is going to be yours for not showing up under Article 14. So just be aware that we all agree that if there's something going on, we will present facts. We'll just tell it like it is. You know, it's like, but I like the person. I like him, I like her, whoever it happens to be, I like them. Doesn't matter. We're not going to take sides. We're just going to tell it like it is because we're asked to come in and testify. Article 15, do not knowingly or recklessly make false or misleading statements about other real estate professionals, their business, or their business practices. So if somebody comes in and says, well, what do you think of Joe Smith? And my answer would be, oh, is he out of jail? So that may not be the best answer to give. But, you know, maybe he's never been in jail, but he's still out, right? I wasn't lying, but I was recklessly making a false or misleading statement. So just be careful on that. It doesn't say you can't say a disparaging word about another realtor as long as it's factual. What it says is you can't knowingly or recklessly make false or misleading statements about other real estate professionals. The best answer, if you're asked about somebody else, well, what do you think about so-and-so? The best answer is, let me tell you about me, and you should talk to them to find out more about them. And I'd prefer just to not answer one way or another. All right, one final time you get to give us an answer here. And that is it okay to have direct contact with the client of another agent? Answer A is never. B is if they contact you first and ask about your services. C, if it's within 3 days of their listing expiring. Or D, if they're only asking for a price opinion. So when I say a client of another agent, I'm talking about someone who has a listing contract. They actually have a signed, it's a seller who has a signed listing contract with another agent. So can you have direct contact with them outside of, I'm calling to see if it's okay to show your house today? So to talk about your services. Is it never? If they contact you first, if it's within 3 days of their listing expiring, or only if they're asking for a price opinion. All right. All right, we got the 6 in the polling and share the results. So here you go. We've got 2 Bs, 3 C, oh, I'm sorry, 2 As, 3 Bs, and 1 C. I'm covering up the answers, so let me get rid of this. And the answer is B, if they contact you first and ask about your services. So congratulations, the majority of you got that one. So what it is you can't solicit business from somebody who is listed with another agent. So you can't go out and say, oh, if you're not happy with your agent, I'd like to tell you what I can do for you. That would be totally inappropriate, and you can't do it. But if someone contacts you and says, I'm not happy with my agent, I want to talk to you, can you do that? And the answer is, yeah, you can talk to them. So let's go on so we can talk about Article 16 here. So Article 16 says, do not engage in any practice or take any action inconsistent with the agency or other exclusive relationships that realtors have with their clients. So again, if someone contacts you first, you can meet with them. You could go out and do a listing presentation of exactly what you're going to do. They're telling you their listing's going to expire in 2 weeks as an example. Fine, let me tell you what I can do. You can go through the whole thing. You can go through your pricing strategy. You can actually sign a listing contract with them today that becomes effective on the day after it expires. So you could go through all those steps. What you can't do is have any discussion with them about what their agent is currently doing that's good, bad, or indifferent. So you can't say, well, I'm going to do it differently than them or whatever. You can say, here's what I would do and talk about your practice. But you can't say, oh, and your agent's really messing up by doing such and such. Nope. Now you're interfering with the agent's relationship that exists. So you can only talk about what you're going to do, but you could do that. It's going to be a rare thing. Most of it will never happen in your career, but it could. There's one other time that Article 16 allows direct contact with a seller by the buyer's agent. And that is if you can't reach the listing agent and you have an offer to present. So say you have a situation where you've written an offer on a property and you've been trying 3 or 4 times a day for 2 or 3 days to reach the listing agent and you can't make contact. You have the right to go to that seller and say, I have an offer, because both clients could be disadvantaged by your inability to reach them. Now, one thing I want to really stress to you though is who's the listing agent? And that's the broker of the company that has it listed. So just because you can't reach a salesperson does not give you the permission to go to the seller directly. You have to go to the broker of that office. And my recommendation to you would be have your broker contact the broker of the other office and explain the dilemma you have. Because the broker then can then, if they can't reach that agent, can assign somebody else to go meet with that client and make sure the seller has proper representation. But say it's a one-person office that has it listed. I'll make up a story. Listing agent is a single proprietor, has a nice new cell phone that gives him the ability to get all the emails and voicemails and everything on his phone, texting, whatever he needs to do. He can use it as a mobile hotspot for his computer because he's going up to Mammoth where he doesn't have Wi-Fi in the place he's staying. And so he says, that's fine because I can use my phone as a mobile hotspot, hook it up to my computer. I can handle counters and offers. I can do everything from here I could do if I was home anyway, not a problem. He says, matter of fact, I'm going to take my phone with me out on the slopes so that I can answer phone calls even while I'm skiing, so I make sure my clients are fully represented. And he sticks his phone in his back pocket as he skis down the slopes. And what do you think the next thing happens? He falls on that cheek that's over top of the phone, and the phone breaks. And he now can't call, can't email, can't text, and can't be a mobile hotspot for his computer. And he's incommunicado. And he's going to be there for a week, and he doesn't want to give up what he paid for his condo and his lift tickets and everything else, so he decides just to stay. Now, on day 1 or 2, you write an offer on that agent's listings. That's when you'd have the right to go and contact that seller directly. It'll probably never happen in your life, but that's the time you could do it. But let me talk about some other things about not any action inconsistent with the agency of another agent. There's going to be times as you're going to be previewing a house to see if you think it'll work for your client. And as you're going through the house, the seller might be there. And because it's just you and the seller says to you, what do you think of the price on my house? Well, you're a helpful person. You want to answer their question, right? Don't do it. Because here's the deal. It might be that that listing agent's working on a price reduction and you come in and say, well, I think the price is fine. Well, you just shot that listing agent in the foot. It might be you say, oh, because you're thinking your client maybe want to make an offer on this someday, you're going to say to them, well, I think the price might be a little high. And it might be the listing agent is telling the seller, hold firm. We don't need to reduce the price right now. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but I think we're comfortable right where we are. Bang, you just shot them in the foot again. So you can't have those kinds of conversations directly with a seller if you're not the listing agent. So what would be the right answer? And the answer is, I can't have that conversation with you, but I would be glad to give my recommendations to your agent if you want to have your agent call me. But I'm sorry, I can't have that conversation with you because of the code of ethics. But just be careful. I mean, it's so easy. People, it's human nature to answer a question if somebody asks you a question, but don't answer the question if it's going to get you in trouble. So Article 16 talks about examples of things, innovative and aggressive business practices and advertising solicitations, whatever. I've talked about dealing with other brokers' clients. Can you send out a mailer to 300 people in a farm area when it's possible that 2 or 3 of them have their houses listed for sale? Do you have to drive the neighborhood and look for signs or do a search in the MLS and pull out anybody that's listed so that you don't send your flyer that you're sending out saying, would you like to do business with me, to somebody that's already listed? And that's carved out as a specific example. If you're sending to a farm area, you don't have to every time research it and pull out ones, but it's a good idea. Check with your broker on the language they want to have on there, that you have some language on it that says that this, if your home is currently listed for sale, this is not intended to be a solicitation. Now, just having that language on there in and of itself does not protect you, because it could be that you send it to everybody whose listing is 5.5 months old in the MLS, but you put on there that if your house is currently listed, is not intended to be a solicitation. Well, yeah, it was, you know, so you're still in violation even though you put the language on there. But if you send it out and you're legitimately just sending out to a blanket group, then there's no problem as long as you're not intentionally targeting someone. So just be aware, you need to respect the agency relationship that other agents have with their clients. And with that, it gets us to Article 17, which is all about arbitration. It says that as a realtor, you will arbitrate contractual disputes rather than take them to the court process. And clients can invoke mandatory arbitration with their realtors if they so choose, and realtors are obligated to cause their firms to arbitrate. So the Code of Ethics, which I don't know if Stephanie's already sent it or it's on its way, going to be coming to you soon. Already sent? That's the nod, okay. So the code protects the buying and selling public, promotes a competitive real estate marketplace, ensures the integrity of our industry, and it's our promise of performance and our promise of professionalism.